Welcome back to the most unprofessional sports channel on YouTube. Welcome back to Swivel Chair Sports. I'm your host, Zach Zuckerberg. Here with the host today, Aaron. Go and say hi, Aaron.
If you like our content, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment and let us know what you think.
And thank you for watching. But other than that, let's go ahead and get into it. So in this video, we're going to be continuing our off-season grading series. So far, we've handed out grades to all of the teams in both AFC and NFC West divisions, as well as the AFC and NFC North divisions. But in this video, we'll be taking a look at the NFC South, which includes, of course, the Falcons, Panthers, Saints, and Buccaneers. If you haven't seen our first few grading videos, we're going to be taking a look at the key departures, key free agency and trade additions, and notable 2024 draft picks before revealing our grades for each team in the division. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons last season suffered through another year in mediocrity while shuffling between quarterbacks Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, with neither man emerging as Atlanta's long-term answer at the quarterback position. So this offseason, they look to change their fortunes, striking big in free agency. But first, the notable losses that the Falcons have had to endure this offseason include guys like number 2 tight end on the depth chart, but number 1 tight end in Arthur Smith's heart, Jonnu Smith, who made the short drive through the entire state of Florida to play for the Miami Dolphins. Meanwhile, cornerback Jeff Okudah is also parting ways with the team after only 1 year in a Falcon uniform, signing a contract with the Houston Texans. They also let Cordero Patterson walk away and sign with the Steelers, feeling comfortable with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier in that running back room. And finally, the Falcons also lost interior offensive lineman Matt Hennessy to the Philadelphia Eagles, who hasn't really been able to reach his full potential with the Falcons due to knee injuries in the last couple years. As for the key additions, of course, most notably bringing in Pro Bowl quarterback Kirk Cousins from Minnesota to start under center for them, assuming he's fully healthy. He should be that missing piece that this Atlanta squad has been needing on offense to take them to the next level. Other than that, though, they did also manage to sign wide receiver Darnell Mooney away from the Bears to fight for that number 2 receiver spot opposite Drake London with other newly acquired receiver Rondale Moore, who they got in trade with the Cardinals. Both of those guys should slot in perfectly alongside London and Kyle Pitts to create a really dynamic receiving group for Kirk Cousins to throw to. Moving on to the draft, the Falcons shocked everybody by taking Michael Penix 8th overall, when several highly regarded edge rushers and defensive linemen were still available, both positions the Falcons could use to improve, but chose to take a guy that they're super high on in Penix, who they hope can develop into their next franchise quarterback. Atlanta did try seemingly to make up for missing out on guys like Dallas Turner and Byron Murphy in the first round by selecting 3 defensive tackles later on in the draft, taking Rook Orororo, I think I said that right, out of Clemson in the second round, who was seen as being towards the top end of the second tier of defensive line prospects this season. Then selecting Brandon Dorlus out of Oregon and Zion Logue from down the road at Georgia in the 4th and 6th rounds respectively. And on top of all that, the Falcons did Falcons things and even chose to bring in yet another running back, granted this time in the 6th round, taking Jace McClellan from Alabama, who may develop into a nice complementary piece to Bijan Robinson down the line when they inevitably part ways with Algier. So what are your thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons offseason, Aaron?
Mixed bag, obviously like some of the moves, but some of the others, especially the Michael Penix draft pick, leaves us questioning whether or not they're, trying to win now, or are they planning for the future? Because they brought in Kirk, and, Penix isn't the youngest quarterback, so
Yeah.
Are you going to waste all of your cheap years with a rookie quarterback? And then have to pay him when you eventually look to move on from Kirk Cousins. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but it'll be exciting to kind of watch this receiving core. Hopefully Drake London can turn into the number 1 receiver that they wanted him to out of USC a few years ago, but I just haven't really had the options at quarterback that
Yeah.
they probably hope to.
Yeah, I think we all expect Kirk Cousins to come in and take the games of Kyle Pitts and Drake London to a completely new level that we haven't seen yet and have been hoping and craving to see from those two guys throughout their short careers so far. But they just haven't, like you said, had the quarterback talent down there in Atlanta up to this point to properly utilize those guys' talents, I feel like. So I do think taking Kirk Cousins in free agency was great. However, and I said this back when they first took him, if you were planning on taking Penix at 8, I feel like he was pretty much available. Like, I don't think anybody before 8 was going to take him. I don't think anybody was looking to move up from 8 to take him. I feel like if you wanted Michael Penix, you could have just missed out on Kirk Cousins, taking him. But I understand maybe wanting to mature him behind a leader and veteran quarterback like Kirk. I don't know. Like I said, he's one of the oldest QB prospects in the draft this year. He was ready to start now, seemingly, so it's going to really suck not getting to see him play this year, and leaves a real bad taste in my mouth and makes this a little bit of a difficult team to grade just because I can't help but focus on the missed opportunities where you could have taken like a defensive stud like Dallas Turner or Byron Murphy. But instead you chose to take your backup quarterback. Hopefully he develops into something special down the line. But yeah, with all that being said, I think I got to settle on a C+ for the Atlanta Falcons, just because they really missed out on an opportunity with that eighth overall pick. Outside of that, I think they did pretty well. I love the new additions to the receiver room, and they didn't really lose a whole lot of substantial talent, but I think if they would have taken one of those defensive studs early this year, they'd be looking at, conference championship run maybe.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with a C+. It easily could have been like a B had they gone with one of those top tier defensive recruits. Just some of the uncertainty with what they did with the Kirk Cousins situation. I'd have been fine with the pick had they not gone with Kirk Cousins and maybe put that money elsewhere.
Agree.
But yeah, just sort of the up with the aridness kind of leaves us with a C+, I think.
Yeah, it's disappointing because they started off the off-season so hot. Like, everybody loved the Kirk Cousins signing, I feel like. So to end it on, kind of a wet fart like that in the draft was disappointing, to say the least. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers last season suffered through one of the worst years in franchise history, where rookie quarterback Bryce Young was unable to provide much of a spark offensively, but mostly due to the dysfunctional front office and coaching situation around him. This offseason, they were hoping to turn the tides of the franchise, one would say. We witnessed a lot of roster turnover this year, starting with the key departures this offseason, most notably trading edge rusher Brian Burns to the Giants instead of choosing to pay him long-term. I know that was kind of a battle between the two sides for a couple years now. But we also saw fellow linebackers Yetur Gross-Matos, I think that's how you say that. If not, I apologize. And Frankie Louvu, both of those guys left in free agency as well. Gross-Matos choosing to sign a 2-year deal with the San Francisco 49ers, while Louvu went up the coast signing a 3-year deal with the Commanders. Panthers also let Hayden Hurst walk away and sign a 1-year deal with the Los Angeles Chargers, choosing to look elsewhere for somebody who can man the tight end position this year. And finally trading away cornerback Dante Jackson to the Steelers in a move that will take us into the most notable additions Carolina made this offseason, where they brought back in return for Jackson wide receiver Deontay Johnson, who looks to battle for that number 1 receiver role with rookie Xavier Leggett this upcoming season. Outside of that, in free agency, the Panthers spent money like it was on fire, bringing in guard Robert Hunt from the Dolphins on a massive 5-year deal to pair alongside fellow free agent acquisition guard Damian Lewis from Seattle, who they also signed to a 5-year contract. The Panthers also look to improve on the defensive side of the football, bringing in linebacker Josie Jewell from the Broncos to fill the void left by losing Frankie Louvu, as well as edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney from Cleveland to be a veteran presence in the locker room and replace some of the production lost by losing Brian Burns. Looking at the draft, the Panthers were without their first-round pick due to the trade that helped them acquire Bryce Young last year. However, they did trade up to pick 32 in order to take wide receiver Xavier Leggett from South Carolina, who they hope can blossom into a number one target for Bryce Young. After that, they took another offensive weapon, Jonathan Brooks, out of Texas in the second round, a running back who could look to steal away the lead back duties this upcoming year, before taking his teammate, tight end Ja'Tavion Sanders, who the Panthers expect to replace most of what Hayden Hurst brought to the table last year and perhaps even exceed that. So, Aaron, what are your thoughts on the Carolina Panthers offseason?
Yeah, they kind of, I don't know if I would say they went all in, but they definitely
Spent a lot of
made
money.
some moves trying to keep Bryce Young upright and healthy, bring in some of those linemen, and then kind of look to replace Brian Burns with Jadeveon Clowney and acquiring Clavon Chason from the Jaguars, former top pick that just didn't really pan out, probably didn't have the production that Jacksonville's wanted. Looking for a new home right up there in North Carolina. So I think that's a good pickup. Hopefully he can kind of turn his career around. But I mean, that was a rough season last year. So I don't know that it could really go much worse, but they're showing that they're trying this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, I do like the commitment, like you said, to keeping Bryce Young upright. I mean, that was by far their biggest flaw last year, was Bryce Young was just getting the shit knocked out of him every single game. The dude, we couldn't even really tell what Bryce Young had to offer because the dude couldn't even stay upright. I mean, he was on the turf more often than he was throwing the football, it felt. So I'm really glad that they invested.
Running for his life.
Yeah, running for his life, if not on the turf. So I really love bringing in those two guards in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to help, hopefully improve what, couldn't be much worse of an offensive line from last year. And then they lost Brian Burns, but like you said, replacing him with Jadeveon Clowney, you at least, bring in some more veteran, another veteran presence to kind of take up that position. He'll be able to be somewhat of a leader in the locker room as well. Maybe doesn't bring quite the same level of production on the field, but I think as far as leadership goes, pretty solid replacement. Love the Josie Jewell addition as well to replace Frankie Louvu. So, and then Hayden Hurst wasn't really providing a whole lot, so being able to replace him with Ja'Tavion Sanders, I think has a lot of upside as well. So I thought that was a great selection during the draft. And then Xavier Leggett, I mean, we all love Xavier Leggett, right? I mean, he seems hilarious, so I think we all love Xavier Leggett. I loved the Panthers offseason this year. Really made a commitment to trying to improve. I think I'm going to give them an A-, really close to an A. If it wasn't for losing a guy, Brian Burns' talent, I think it would have been.
Yeah, I'm a little lower. I'm at a B. Although, I am seeing and did hear that there's one guy that they added that could really push me over the top up to an A+.
Oh yeah?
And that's a former Mizzou kicker, Harrison Mevis.
Oh! The thicker kicker.
Free agent. Infamously hit the 61-yard field goal against Kansas State last season.
Broke the record for longest field goal made in SEC history too, by the way.
Yep. So hopefully he wins the job down there. But yeah, I think I'm hovering right around a B. I would have loved to see a few more moves at the line position. Maybe look to go out and get a tackle or something. But
sure.
They did probably about as good as they could have.
Yeah, no, I really loved what they did this offseason. You could nitpick and say they maybe should have brought in some outside line talent, but really strengthen that interior part of it, and just completely turning around that offensive weapon group on, with bringing in Ja'Tavion Sanders, Jonathan Brooks, trading for Deontay Johnson, and drafting Xavier Leggett. I expect this Panthers team to be head and shoulders above what they were last year. So,
not saying much.
Yeah, well, still. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints. The Saints last season brought in quarterback Derek Carr, who they hoped would bring the franchise back to relevancy ever since Drew Brees retired. Carr suffered numerous injuries, as he has throughout his career, and the Saints were unable to keep their head above water, finishing outside of the playoffs. This offseason, they looked to course correct after some poor cap management in the past presented several hurdles that the Saints front office has had to overcome these last few years. Starting off with the key losses this offseason, the Saints lost mostly defensive talent this free agency period, losing safety Lonnie Johnson, who signed with the Houston Texans, as well as linebacker Zach Bond, who signed with the Eagles. They also lost defensive tackle Malcolm Roach to the Denver Broncos, and watched cornerback Isaac Yiadom walk out the door and sign a free agency deal with the 49ers. On the offensive side of the football, while the Saints did lose some decent offensive linemen in the likes of James Hurst, who retired, and Andrus Peat, who signed with the Raiders, they also parted ways with backup quarterback Jameis Winston, who will have to hope there's enough W's for him to gobble up in Cleveland as he now looks to back up Deshaun Watson. And finally, wide receiver Michael Thomas is still unemployed as the Saints look to move on from him and his injury-plagued career. As far as key additions go this offseason, mostly bringing in defensive talent, signing edge rusher Chase Young to provide a spark off the edge alongside Cam Jordan. They also managed to scoop up two-time Super Bowl champion Willie Gay to man the linebacker position, as he showed a lot of promise in a stacked Kansas City linebacker room, as well as some other defensive talent outside of just those two guys. But looking at their draft, New Orleans immediately improved the offensive line by taking tackle Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State, 14th overall. Fuaga was one of the highest rated tackle prospects in the draft this year, not far behind consensus number 1 tackle Joe Alt. They also grabbed a guy who many had atop the cornerback big boards before the 2023 season began in Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama, who projects to be an immediate impact player at the cornerback position. And possibly the most intriguing draft selection the Saints made this year had to be quarterback Spencer Rattler in the 5th round out of South Carolina, who could be a really nice developmental project behind Derek Carr, where he can hopefully learn a lot from a QB that's been around the block a time or two. But Aaron, what do you think of the New Orleans Saints offseason?
Yeah, I like the defensive moves they made. They're definitely one of the more defensive-oriented teams in that NFC South, and kind of look to stick with that MO this offseason with Chase Young and Willie Gay. But then they also looked on the offensive side of the ball to kind of replace Michael Thomas, bringing in both Cedric Wilson and Equanimous St. Brown. So looking to get some veteran leadership in that wide receiver room, along with Chris Olave, hoping that he continues to develop on the track that he has been. But then, yeah, that Kool-Aid McKinstry, not only was he one of the best DBs to pick up, but he's also got one of the coolest names in the draft.
Course,
so
yes.
That's a big plus. That's
good marketing.
Arguably a must-have jersey. So no matter who you're a fan of.
Revenue, baby.
And then losing Jameis Winston in the offseason, had to kind of look to somebody else for their backup quarterback job, and settled on Spencer Rattler, who kind of on the fence about how good he'll end up being. Kind of a polarizing player about whether it was the offense or him that was the problem there in South Carolina, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the most fun topic to talk about with the Saints is the Spencer Rattler situation, because he is such a polarizing player and fell down the draft board supposedly due to mostly his, high school reality show, QB1 or whatever, which I don't know how much stock to put into that. But outside of that, yeah, they did a really good job kind of adding talent to the non-glamorous positions outside of, I guess, edge rusher with Chase Young. Bringing in tackle Talise Fuaga, probably the most notable name outside of free agency that they brought in this year. Obviously, tackle's not a super glamorous position. They had a pretty boring offseason. I'll be honest. Their offseason wasn't super exciting outside of, the big name of Chase Young. Outside of that, most of the stuff they brought in was just to kind of fill in the gaps, which I don't think is a bad thing. I do want to preface that. I don't think it was a bad thing what they did this offseason. I think they did what they needed to with an old veteran quarterback like Derek Carr, who's probably only got a few years left, I'd imagine. Bringing in a possible developmental project to sit behind him and learn, building up, the offensive line a little bit, bringing in a lot of defensive talent to, not put as much pressure on Derek Carr or potentially, if he steps in, Spencer Rattler this year. So no, I think they did a really good job of what they needed to do. Even though it maybe wasn't the most, exciting offseason, I do think it was what they needed. So with that being said, I think I'm going to give them a solid. I think I'm going to give them a B minus. Really close to a B though.
I'm leaning A minus actually.
Okay.
Bringing in, making 4 moves on that offensive line. Obviously, that was kind of the big sticking point in that team last year. Derek Carr with injuries, getting beat up a little bit, but they bring in Ali Udo out of Minnesota and Shane Lemieux out of New York Giants. So, really taking steps there to keep their current franchise guy healthy, and kind of like you said, if he has to step in, Spencer Rattler. So yeah, I'm leaning A minus because I don't think they really needed to do a whole lot to kind of win their division. They were already kind of right there in contention, but they made the unglamorous needed moves.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to, first time we've ever done this so far, I'm gonna amend my grade and actually shift up to a B because I was kind of on the fence between the two, but I think you're right. They didn't really have to do a whole lot to contend with their division. It's really between them and the Falcons, and then maybe the Bucs are sneaky again this year. That'll be the next team we talk about, obviously. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and shift up to a B. Sorry, New Orleans. I was not familiar with your game. So moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs surprised some people last season, sneaking into the playoffs behind new quarterback Baker Mayfield and making some noise by beating the defending conference champion Philadelphia Eagles in the wild card round. This offseason, the Bucs looked to build off a successful season despite facing some potential cap limitations and having to re-sign a lot of quality talent. Starting off with the key players they lost. Most notably, they lost middle linebacker and franchise staple Devin White, who went up the coast to sign with the Philadelphia Eagles. And we all kind of assumed he was probably out the door this year, given Tampa's cap problems and the other people they had to re-sign. In order to address some of those cap issues, they did choose to release Pro Bowl edge rusher Shaq Barrett, who was looking to be towards the end of his run as a prolific pass rusher in the league anyways. I think it was time to move on from him. Outside of that, the only other real loss of note was trading cornerback Carlton Davis to the Lions, presumptively to also clear up some cap space for the impending re-signing barrage that went on right after, free agency kicked off. Oh, but they did lose center Ryan Jensen this offseason, as well as he went into retirement this year. But looking into the key additions by the Bucs this offseason, most of what they did this year was bringing back players that they had success with last season, most notably signing quarterback Baker Mayfield to a 3-year extension after he led Tampa to the playoffs last season and even won a playoff game. Also choosing to retain his top target, bringing back wide receiver Mike Evans on a 2-year deal after many of us thought he would be playing elsewhere this next year. And on the defensive side, bringing one of their staple linebackers back in Lavonte David, as well as all-pro safety Antoine Winfield. 2 more guys we thought could be gone this offseason. But the Bucs weren't satisfied just bringing back the pieces they had. They also went out and signed veteran outside linebacker Randy Gregory to fill the void left by releasing Shaq Barrett, and safety Jordan Whitehead to pair alongside Antoine Winfield. Looking at their draft, the Bucs immediately looked to replace some of the production lost by Ryan Jensen retiring, taking Graham Barton out of Duke in the first round, who I really like and think can do a great job protecting Baker Mayfield. After that, taking some defense in the next couple rounds, scooping up edge rusher Chris Braswell out of Bama in the second round, and safety Tyke Smith in the third round out of Georgia. A couple of SEC talents right there. And then finding some more value a few picks later in the third round, the Bucs were also able to select wide receiver Jalen McMillan out of Washington, who should develop nicely learning from the likes of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in the wide receiver room. So Aaron, what are your thoughts on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offseason?
Yeah, this is one of those teams that, they have a certain culture that they like, and once they find those players, They like to keep them in there. Obviously, bringing back Levante David, bringing in Jordan Whitehead. Those were some massive signings. I do worry about their offensive line kind of losing their heart and soul in Jensen.
Yeah.
But they did, kind of like you said, make some moves to try and replace that. Jalen McMillan, I think, was a super value pick at where they got him. I think he easily could have went way higher. Yeah. I really like the Bucky Irving pick. He had a stellar year there in Oregon on a really good team. And then somebody to sort of watch for, Devin Colt out of Washington. Didn't have a whole lot of production while he was there, but again, they had some superstar receivers and a really good running back. So it's kind of hard to get a lot of production, especially at tight end when you've got that sort of talent. But he's a really good athlete, so maybe look to him to develop for the next couple years.
Yeah, I'd forgotten to mention Bucky Irving. I thought that was a really good selection to pair in the backfield because they already had a pretty good running game last year. So, yeah, I'm going to definitely sound biased when I give out this grade. I know I am. But before I say what my grade is, I do want to begin by saying the reason my grade is what it is. I thought they were going to lose about half the dudes they brought back. I thought David was gone. I thought Winfield was gone. I thought Evans was gone. All three of those dudes are back. Lose Devin White, sure, but you expected to lose more than that for Alec, no doubt. You expected to lose more than just Devin White and having to release Shaq Barrett. Shaq Barrett was at the end of his rope, like I mentioned earlier anyways. I don't think that's a massive loss. Devin White is for sure, but the fact that that's the only real substantial name out of that group of 10 studs that they could have lost this offseason, I'd give them an A. I give the Buccaneers an A offseason because they were able to bring back just about every single key piece that they were set to lose, including Baker, including Mike Evans, Levante David, Antoine Winfield. I thought they did amazing. And then also pairing that, bringing in veteran talent like Randy Gregory, who I think is a good leader in the locker room. Great pick right there. Graham Barton getting selected in the first round to, like you said, hopefully replace some of that Ryan Jensen production to a degree. Won't quite be the same guy right off the bat, but hopefully he can develop into something close. Yeah, I am in love with what the Buccaneers did this offseason. I thought it was going to, be a sinking ship. It was a nice little one-year run last season, but that's about all they'd get. So to be able to bring back the guys they did great.
I'm actually right there with you. I think an A is a very good grade. They obviously kind of surprised the world last year with how they dismantled the Eagles in the playoffs. And then to keep almost all of the key players from that kind of run, and then make the additions that they made. I think they're definitely up there as the contenders for the NFC South this year. Granted, all of them are, other than kind of the Panthers.
Right, yeah.
But I think definitely, wouldn't be a far shot to say that they could win the division, win a playoff game again. So I'm right there with you at an A.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm very happy for Baker Mayfield finding a home down in Tampa Bay after really just getting a raw deal in Cleveland. He got screwed, man. He got screwed in Cleveland, so to be able to battle back and find a starting job for at least a few years now in Tampa Bay is a really cool story for him. Not exactly an underdog story. He was first overall pick after all, but still, I like it. I like the story. I like him. He was a walk-on, so you can start way back there if you want. He was a walk-on in college, before being drafted number 1 overall and failing to meet up to the expectations that Cleveland had out for him. But that's really Cleveland's fault, in my opinion, not his. Kind of similar to Zach Wilson up in New York. But anyways, I expect the NFC South to be a pretty competitive division. Probably not so much because, there is a decent amount of talent, but it's probably more so because all of the teams are around the same level of talent. There's really nobody that stands out amongst the pack. They're all probably going to hover around 10 wins outside the Panthers, maybe. I think the Bucks, Saints, and Falcons are all going to fight for that 4th seed in the NFC, presumably, and maybe one of the wild card spots for the second place team. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this division shakes out. I think it should be pretty close between the top 3 teams, and who knows, maybe the Panthers can be a little bit sneaky and surprise some people this year as well. But Unless you got anything else, Aaron, I think that'll do it for this episode of the most unprofessional sports channel on YouTube, Swivel Chair Sports. I've been your host, Zach Circleberg-Burkle, here with the coast today, Aaron. Go and say bye, Aaron.
Bye.
All right, just really wanted to thank you for watching. We've had a lot of, love and support coming through these past couple weeks. A lot of views that we didn't imagine we'd get. A lot of new subscribers. So hello to all of our new subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. Tell some friends. Make sure to like and subscribe if you made it this far in the video. Comment down below if you disagree with any of our opinions or agree with any of our opinions. We'd really like to hear people that agree. That makes us feel better. But other than that, I think that'll do it. Have a good day. And deuces. And watched cornerback Isaac Yiadom. Isaac Yiadom. Isaac Yiadom. I might have to I might just have to put like the whole clip of me trying to figure out how to pronounce this guy's name. Isaac Yiadom. We'll say Yiadom.
How do you spell it?
Yiadom.
Edom?
Edom? Isaac Edom? That sounds much better than Yiadom. Yiadom! And watch cornerback Isaac Edom. And watch cornerback Isaac Edom walk out the door and